Did you know that 35% of adults report experiencing poor quality sleep? Let me put you onto something that's going to transform your sleep. Cozy Earth. Discover the secret to better sleep with Cozy Earth's luxurious bedding products. And here's an exclusive offer just for my listeners. Use the code TOM, T-H-O-M, for 35% off at CozyEarth.com. Cozy Earth bedding products are crafted with temperature-regulating technology, adapting to your body's needs, ensuring a sleep experience tailored to you. Sure helps me. They use only the very best fabrics, materials, and weaves, offering superior softness that invites you to sink into a world of comfort. Worried about commitment? Cozy Earth stands by the quality and longevity of its products. Enjoy a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty on all purchases. That's a decade of unparalleled comfort and support. Treat yourself to ultimate comfort with Cozy Earth bedding and sleepwear, and prioritize your self-care and sleep health. Head over to CozyEarth.com and use the promo code TOM, T-H-O-M, for 35% off. Upgrade your nights, transform your days with Cozy Earth. Hi, Thom Hartmann here. My Hidden History series includes 10 timely and paramount books that break down some of the biggest issues of today. The first is The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, where I look at the real history of guns in America, had to do with slave patrols, and what we can do to limit both their lethal impact and the power of the NRA. The next is The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, where I lay out how Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon both committed treason to become president just to put right-wingers on the Supreme Court and how the Supreme Court paid them back. The third is The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, where we look at how Hillary Clinton actually won the last election and common sense things that people can do to reclaim their rights to vote. Coming this fall is The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. And next spring, you'll see The Hidden History of Oligarchy, The Rise of the Hard Right. That's the Hidden History series by yours truly, Thom Hartmann, available wherever fine books are sold. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes in depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of women and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalists' modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solutions, how we get out there and get active. Pre-order now at any fine bookstore. I'm also on the road with a book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series. On Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle. Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis. On Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland. And Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at TomHartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the
I'm Amy Goodman. In Russia, the death toll has risen to 137 from an attack on a popular concert hall in Moscow on Friday. Authorities say gunmen opened fire inside a sold-out rock concert, then set the venue ablaze, the Crocus City Hall. More than 100 people were also injured, many in critical condition. Authorities in Russia have detained 11 people, including 4 men from Tajikistan who appeared in court today. They all appeared to have been badly beaten, possibly during interrogations. One suspect, who was in a wheelchair, seemed to lose consciousness during the court session. Reuters reports he may have had an eye missing. An affiliate of the Islamic State, ISIS-K, has claimed responsibility and posted video of the attack. Russian authorities have suggested Ukraine was involved in the attack, a claim strongly denied by Kyiv. We'll have more on the story after headlines with Professor Nina Khrushcheva and the New Yorker magazine's Joshua Yaffa. Horrifying accounts continue to come from Gaza City, where Israel's raid on Al-Shifa Hospital has entered a second week. Israeli forces have killed at least 170 people at the hospital and detained another 400. Survivors of the raid have told Al Jazeera Israeli tanks and armored bulldozers have driven over bodies and ambulances. Israeli forces are also attacking 2 other hospitals in Gaza. Meanwhile, the head of the UN Palestinian aid agency, UNRWA, says Israel's now denying access to all UNRWA food convoys to northern Gaza, even though the region is on the brink of famine. On Saturday, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres traveled to the Rafah border crossing.
A long line of blocked red relief trucks on one side of the gates, the long shadow of starvation on the other. That is more than tragic. It is a moral outrage.
Over the weekend, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris warned against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu invading Rafah. She spoke to Rachel Scott of ABC News.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake.
A mistake, but would there be consequences if he does move forward?
Well, we're going to take it one step at a time, but we've been very clear in terms of our perspective on whether or not that should happen.
Are you ruling out that there would be consequences from the United States?
I am ruling out nothing.
This comes as Israel continues to carry out attacks across Gaza, where the death toll has topped 32,200. This is a Palestinian man named Yunus Qassab in Rafah.
Israel does not want a ceasefire. Instead, it wants to continue exterminating the Palestinian people. This is what Israel and America are planning simultaneously. They do not want a ceasefire. Israel seeks genocide against the Palestinian people, and particularly the Gaza Strip, and this is a crime.
At the United Nations Security Council, China and Russia Friday vetoed a Gaza ceasefire resolution drafted by the United States. China's ambassador to the UN, Zhang Jun, criticized the text because it did not actually demand a ceasefire.
The final text remains ambiguous and does not call for an immediate ceasefire, nor does it even provide an answer to the question of realizing a ceasefire in a short time. This is a clear deviation from the consensus of the Council members and fell far short of the expectations of the international community. An immediate ceasefire is a fundamental prerequisite for saving lives, expanding humanitarian access, and preventing greater conflicts.
The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, criticized Russia and China for vetoing the resolution.
So let's be honest, for all the fiery rhetoric, we all know that Russia and China are not doing anything diplomatically to advance a lasting peace or to meaningfully contribute to the humanitarian response effort.
President Biden signed a $1.2 trillion spending package to keep the federal government open until October. The Senate approved the appropriations bill 74-24. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders voted no because the bill stripped funding to UNRWA for the next year.
Tens of thousands of people are starving. UNRWA is trying to feed them, and the Israeli government and its allies like AIPAC spend much of their time lobbying to defund UNRWA, the major organization which is feeding starving people. Sadly, tragically, many members of Congress seem to be happy to be part of this starvation caucus.
In the House, the spending bill was approved 286-134. New York Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who voted no, accused Israel of committing genocide during a speech on the House floor.
If you want to know what an unfolding genocide looks like, open your eyes. It looks like the forced famine of 1.1 million innocents. It looks like thousands of children eating grass as their bodies consume themselves while trucks of food are slowed and halted just miles away. It looks like good and decent people who do nothing, or too little, too late. It is against United States law to provide weapons to forces who block United States humanitarian assistance. And that is exactly what is happening right now.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
The horrific toll of the mass shooting evident at the smoldering scene of Russia's deadliest attack in decades. More than 135 men, women, and children slaughtered, hundreds more injured. It was Friday evening in Moscow when 4 ISIS-K terrorists armed with automatic weapons shot their way into a concert hall at a shopping complex. The audience inside was just waiting for the rock band to begin when gunfire ripped through the hall. All the while, hearing the relentless, terrifying burst of automatic weapons fire. An eyewitness saying the men fired directly into the crowd, face to face. Another witness saying when the shooting was over, the ISIS-K gunmen hurled explosives as they fled. Within minutes, black smoke and flames pouring from the facility, trapping many inside and caving in the roof. Russia saying they captured and charged these men with the shooting, one clearly bloodied and beaten, with reports of torture as well. Russian President Vladimir Putin claiming without evidence that the men were headed to Ukraine. He never mentioned ISIS-K, despite its claim of responsibility. The U.S. confirming the attack was carried out by the Islamic extremists as well. White House officials saying they had warned the Russians of an imminent risk of an ISIS-K attack just 2 weeks ago, an attack they said could specifically target a concert hall. Instead of heeding the warning, Putin said the U.S. was trying to blackmail Russia. That information was not only passed to the Russian government, it was made public as well. ISIS-K is based in Afghanistan and is seeking revenge against Russia for its involvement in the war in Syria and elsewhere. Also this morning, in the wake of this attack, France has raised its national security alert system to its highest level.
Right ahead of the Summer Olympics. Woohoo! So much has happened just this morning. That is where we left off on Friday. And we didn't know what was going on because it's Russia. You never know what's going on. And Vlad lies like Trump does. So it was very disorienting, the whole thing. It turns out 137 people were killed. There are a lot more wounded. Hospitals were overwhelmed with people who were shot. And, you know, everybody's like, it was ISIS? Why ISIS in Russia? People don't remember who Vladimir Putin is. People don't understand that Vladimir Putin and Assad in Syria waged a disgusting, disgraceful war. I kept referring to Aleppo each time I would look at Ukraine because I said, this is the way the Russians fight. This is Russians fighting. They go after hospitals. And then when you saw what was going on in Gaza, it looked like, Netanyahu had learned something from the Russians because he went after the same civilian targets, apartment blocks, hospitals, schools. I mean, it's like the rules of war are gone, and people used to laugh that we had rules of war, but now you understand why. So Russia was attacked not just because of what it did in Afghanistan for like 9 long years. And remember when, do you remember when we used to talk about Russia in Afghanistan 9 years and laugh at how long that war went on? Do you realize we were there for 20? Not so funny. Not as much of a belly laugh as it used to be, is it? No. So there's that. And then there were the 2 wars in Chechnya. 2 wars. Chechnya is a Muslim portion of the Caucasus. A lot of this Northern Caucasus region, Dagestan, places you don't even, Turkmenistan, you think you don't need to pay attention to, and you kind of don't until you realize these are Muslim places where Vladimir Putin has subjected people to abject poverty, degrading treatment, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th class citizenship, if anything even remotely related to citizenship, and violent attacks. Violent attacks where Chechnya was one of those where he laid waste to, Chechnya twice. Grozny, that place. So that's why ISIS attacked Russia. That's why. And, it's almost at the point where, and I won't go there, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of a thing where you're like, okay, well, George Bush created ISIS. What? Yes, he did. We were attacked by Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabians. You remember that? Yeah. And then we went over and attacked nations that had nothing to do with Saudi Arabia or with 9/11. We attacked Afghanistan and we attacked Iraq. Now, a small argument could be made that Osama bin Laden seemed to be living in Afghanistan, but I think, after the Battle of Tora Bora, which no one remembers, where we surrounded Tora Bora on all three sides? What? Isn't a square like four sides? Yeah, well, was it a triangle? No, it was a square that we surrounded on all three sides. Yeah, and the eastern portion that led to Pakistan, that was open. So a lot of the people, including, I believe, Osama bin Laden, that early ran into Pakistan. We stayed in Afghanistan for 20 freaking years. Holy crap. Okay, so all that happened, right? And Vladimir Putin was there before us. And the group ISIS-K, the one that we warned, this is crazy. We warned Vladimir Putin. Why did we warn Vladimir Putin? Why did we give him a heads up that that Moscow was going to be the target of a terrorist attack by ISIS-K and it would target concert halls? And all of that actually happened. And in light of the reason why we made it public was because we knew Vlad was going to blame it on Ukraine, which he has done. And it ain't Ukraine. And you know how you know it's not Ukraine? Ukraine would have attacked Russian military. They would have attacked ammunition dumps. They would have attacked, military targets. They would never have attacked civilians. It's not what, we do, and it's not what Ukraine does. So it's a terrorist attack, and it's a terrorist group. And we also know that, we gave them warning that this terrorist group named ISIS-K, the K is for Khorasan. What does Khorasan mean? No, it's not a kind of carpeting, although, you could confuse. It means Afghanistan, it means Pakistan, it means Turkmenistan, it means that area of the world, Central Asia, Northern Caucasus, okay? And this is a group that is a terrorist group that is operating from there. And they decided, they rehearsed it. We saw them apparently, and we warned Russia. Why did we warn Russia? Because the United States has something we call a duty to warn. Now, mostly in the United States, we associate the duty to warn with, warning people that Donald Trump is insane. Remember that whole group of psychiatrists that actually banded together to tell you that we have a duty to warn you that your president is insane? Yeah. So that's what we associate duty to warn with. But the true duty to warn is a real duty that America really does do when anyone in the world is in the sights of a terrorist group where civilians may be targeted. So the State Department made this warning public so that if Vladimir Putin refused to keep his people safe, which obviously he did, and Vladimir Putin was looking for an excuse to tell the people that he failed to keep safe, that someone else did it so that he could gin up some sort of fervor and enthusiasm for attacking Ukraine more than he already has for the operation, not a war, the operation, then he would say that, and we needed to show the world that we had told him ahead of time who it would be and that it would be a concert, so that when he blamed Ukraine, we could say, you're lying. You're lying because we warned you, and you failed to keep them safe. Phew, that's what a reliable, responsible country does.
Randi Rhodes. RandiRhodes.com.
The Bob Cesca Show.
Bob Cesca. Republicans are now putting up for president once again a man who is probably up to his beady, freaky-looking eyeballs in blackmail from foreign nations or some sort of financial influence that he will then use the presidency in order to satisfy. And this is a huge issue. Anyone else, this would disqualify them from getting anywhere close to the White House. This compromises Donald Trump so badly that it could affect policy, it could affect the way he governs. We saw him, what was it? He got $5.5 million during his 4 years from China alone. God knows how many more millions on top of that. I mean, Rachel Maddow has been talking about this a lot in terms of bilking the Secret Service for room and board at his various resorts. I mean, that's how he does this. You don't want a man entering the White House while he is up to his beady goddamn eyeballs in debt of any sort, especially debt that pertains directly to his status as a business person, that exposes the fact that he's an enormous and obvious fraud. This further reinforces the fact that Donald Trump has no business being anywhere close to the economy, and why anyone, especially after watching him crash the economy, watching him rack up 14% unemployment, 9 million jobs lost, right, during COVID under Donald Trump.
Our challenge here is the national amnesia. I intend to help the public with their amnesia about Donald Trump.
Same.
And I hope the people listening also ramp up your efforts in this area. It's time to get back to work in this regard.
Bob Cesca. It's the Bob Cesca Show. New episodes every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everywhere you get your podcasts, and at bobcescashow.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day Centralia Coal Mine Number 5 exploded, killing 111 miners in Centralia, Illinois. The explosion occurred just as the day shift was ending. Those not killed instantly were trapped and died from their burns or the afterdamp. Words scrawled on the wall of the mine read, "Look in our pockets. We all have notes. Please give them to our wives." State inspectors had been forewarning mine owners about the dangers of accumulated combustible coal dust for years before the explosion, but were ignored. Illinois Mine Inspector Driscoll Scanlon had been filing reports since 1942 about deteriorating conditions. The demand for coal during wartime had increased production at the expense of safety. In the aftermath of the explosion, John L. Lewis, president of the United Mine Workers of America, called a work stoppage in memory of the dead miners. He also held Secretary of the Interior Julius Krug guilty of criminal negligence. Lewis accused Krug of having failed to enforce existing mine regulations. In response, Krug ordered that 518 mines remain closed for inspection. The House and Senate proceeded to organize hearings on mine safety. They demanded that the Bureau of Mines continue to pass inspection findings on to the proper state agencies. Given the power mine owners had at the state level, these instructions ensured no improvements in mine safety would occur. It would be another 22 years before any real change occurred at the federal level.
It happened an hour ago, way down in this tunnel of coal. The gas caught fire from somebody's lamp, and the miners are choking in smoke.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Don't give up, don't give up, what's true.
All things Randy at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
All right. And then this just in.
Today at the UN, a lot of news. The Security Council passing a resolution for a ceasefire and hostage release resolution in Gaza without condemning Hamas for the October 7th massacre. The U.S. deciding to abstain, according to the White House, letting that resolution pass instead of vetoing it. So Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu says he is now canceling a visit to the U.S. by his top advisor, Ron Dermer, and his national security advisor for meetings that were to happen at the White House and the State Department on Wednesday. Joining us now is NBC's Raf Sanchez from Tel Aviv. And we should point out there is already an Israeli defense delegation here for meetings at the Pentagon. But there was going to be a much bigger and higher level meeting on Wednesday at the White House involving Ron Dermer, the former longtime ambassador here from Israel and the closest advisor, of course, to Netanyahu. and that is being canceled. Raph?
That's right, Andrea. This is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's way of signaling his fury that the U.S. allowed this Security Council resolution to pass. The Prime Minister, in a statement put out a little while ago, accusing the U.S. of abandoning its position at the UN Security Council, saying he is calling off that visit by one of his closest advisors and Israel's national security advisor, a visit that President Biden specifically requested from him in their phone call at the beginning of last week, their first phone call in more than a month.
Remember that? Last week we said that they hadn't spoken to each other in a really long time. And then they got on the phone and they started talking. And Biden said, why don't you come over here, send me a top delegation of the leading experts in your country, and we will show you alternative ways to rout out Hamas without attacking Rafah. And then we introduced a resolution for a ceasefire, which Russia vetoed. Russia vetoed war. Russia vetoed ceasefire. And then Russia, I just find this fascinating. Russia was attacked by ISIS-K. Now, ISIS-K, by the way, is the same group that attacked at the gate, the Abbey Gate, when we were leaving Afghanistan. You remember that, where we lost 13 soldiers? That's the same exact terrorist group that attacked Russia, ISIS-K, okay? And all of a sudden, Russia is now subjected to a horrendous civilian-targeted terrorist attack by ISIS-K, and suddenly they don't veto the ceasefire in Gaza. Suddenly they're all about a ceasefire in Gaza, and the United States abstains, seeing that China and Russia, who are on the Security Council, which in my mind makes the Security Council a freaking joke, but thus the world turns this way. So they didn't veto. And the ceasefire was passed. The United States abstained from voting. Now, last week, we introduced a ceasefire resolution where our resolution had three things in it. It had a release of hostages in exchange for a ceasefire. The ceasefire was to last at least 6 months. I believe 6 months or 6 weeks. I can't recall. And we were going to turn that into a permanent ceasefire. And it also had a one other thing in it. It condemned Hamas for October 7th. This ceasefire did not condemn Hamas for October 7th. And I think the reason why it did not condemn Hamas for October 7th is so that the United States could then abstain and say, well, it didn't have a condemnation of Hamas. We couldn't vote for that. You see what I mean? It's very parsed. This whole, dog and pony show at the United Nations is all very parsed. But here's the thing. When the United Nations General Assembly votes, that is non-binding. Don't ask me why. When more of the world's countries weigh in, it's non-binding. But the Elite Security Council, when they vote, 14 countries, when they vote, that's binding. And any one of the countries can veto all the countries. And when you consider that the countries that can veto and do often is Russia and China, neither of which practices anything remotely like democracy, and that they can veto a democratic vote, it just seems very hysterical. It just seems very funny at this point that the UN is irrevocably broken. But we managed to eke out a binding ceasefire today from the United Nations. Now, no one knows if, Netanyahu will actually ignore the ceasefire, which, by the way, is binding. It's binding on all the world's countries, all the member countries. But he could ignore it, and then what? Then he goes to The Hague, I suppose, and he can join his friend Vlad, who has been, declared a war criminal. Vlad has, because Vlad kidnaps children and brings them out of Ukraine into Russia and then re-educates them in camps.
What kind of effect would that have while he's in power, while he's in power? What kind of effect would that have on our relationship with them going forward?
Well, that's the interesting question, isn't it? What does America do if Netanyahu ignores it and goes into Rafah anyway? I mean, we have warned him 1,000 ways to Sunday starting last week. You know, we said Jake Sullivan gave an amazing speech. It was 3 minutes long. Well, it was more than 3 minutes, but I tried to cut it up into smaller pieces. And the smallest I could get, I thought, because what you need to know, it would take a whole 3 minutes of your time. Which, when you consider that America's attention span is 46 seconds, and in Brett's case, less.
You got to cut that in half, then cut it in half again.
Right? Howard, too. Don't understand it. Really learn to live with it, because that's the way things are. I've learned to live with it, so I don't play 3-minute clips anymore. But I'm going to on the other side of this break, right? Because Jake Sullivan told Israel, told them, come over here, send a top delegation over here, because we have alternatives to what you want to do in Rafah. We have alternatives to sacrificing the lives of tens of thousands of innocent civilians in Gaza. We have an alternative to routing out the remnants of Hamas, something different than what you've been doing. We would like a ceasefire at the start so that we could rush aid in and prevent what is an imminent famine. So we got this whole thing, that we'd like to present to you, this whole idea, this whole humane approach to solving your terrorist problem. Now, what was very interesting to me was we got a phone call from a woman. She was very, very polite, and she was, really cautious with the way she said things, because she knew what she was saying was something counter to, what I had been explaining. And I appreciated that she did it that way, because that makes conversation possible. And it also makes me curious and makes me want to go find the clip she was talking about. Now, she told us that she had seen Clarissa Ward, who is a very brave, incredible war reporter, war correspondent, goes to the war zone, has been doing this work for 20 years, talking to some people. Now, she got confused, as most people do, between the West Bank and Gaza. And she got it a little confused about the extremists in Israel, like the American extremists, are a very slight minority. But of course, they do get all the attention, don't they? Here and there.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes. RandiRhodes.com.
This is Stephanie Miller, and here's what you missed. I keep saying that it appears to me, if it's true he can't get the money anywhere, it's because no one thinks he's going to win. So, you know what I mean? Like, otherwise, having a United States president in your pocket would be a pretty good investment. Where do we start with all this? So the clock, I can hear the 60 minutes clock in my head, which makes me so happy. I'm sure Trump can too. There's reporting out this morning. Maggie Haberman reveals Trump world chatter about Trump rage at property seizures, possible bankruptcy. So the first thing I've heard is you can't discharge fraud through bankruptcy, debt. Right? I mean, obviously, Trump just went on social media and said he has $500 million in cash. So here's where what he says meets a court of law, right? So what?
Well, Steph,
go ahead.
The good news, I didn't hear that he just said that, but the good news for Donald Trump is he can just take that $500 million, deposit it in the court's escrow account. He needs to come up with another couple of $100,000 to account for the interest that will accrue during the appeal. But if he's telling the truth, bully for him. I guess, Tish James won't have to begin seizing his properties. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Donald Trump's probably not telling the truth.
Right. But I guess, once again, there's no consequence for that. I mean, because obviously the judge would say the same thing you just did. Okay, great. Well, then you can pay your bond. But
and not only that, Steph, do you think he would have authorized his lawyers to file that unbelievably embarrassing court filing that said Donald Trump doesn't have the money, Donald Trump cannot get anybody to issue him a bond because nobody trusts him and he doesn't have the assets to secure a bond? Listen, if he had $500 million, he would not have wanted his lawyers to put his you-know-what in the wind like that.
Hear all this and more on the next Stephanie Miller Show.
Joe Biden is ready to protect America's southern border, crack down on illegal crossings, set tough but fair new standards, build up Border Patrol, adding thousands of new agents, stop the flow of fentanyl, child sex traffickers, and even terrorists. There's only one problem.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump has ordered Republicans to block the toughest immigration bill in decades. For all their tough talk, their solution is to do nothing, because Donald Trump needs chaos to win.
He'd rather weaponize this issue than actually solve it.
If he wins, he'll do nothing. Just like last time, his wall, a joke. Donald Trump doesn't care if your family's safety or the lives of law enforcement officers are in the balance. He's on the side of the cartels, coyotes, and child traffickers. There's only one candidate who will do something about our border, and it was never Donald Trump.
When a fox attacks a hen house, is it uncivil for the hens to raise a ruckus? 2 Supreme Court justices say it is. Elevating collegiality above social justice, right-wing extremists Amy Coney Barrett and progressive jurist Sonia Sotomayor have jointly been hailing America's top court as a model of genteel political discourse, claiming that the 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats disagree agreeably. We do not interrupt one another, and we never raise our voices, Barrett primly lectured to a recent conference of civics teachers. Sotomayor chimed in that court decorum frowns on any internal comments that, quote, could be viewed by other justices as hurtful. How sweet that the Supremes are so judiciously cordial inside their marble sanctuary. But how bitter that the court's lockstep Republican ideologues are so crudely slapping down women's rights, running roughshod over our environmental protections, stomping on voting rights, enthroning plutocracy, imposing theocracy, and so awful much more.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randy, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Oh, my God. Every day, everybody. Every day. We're just like, I think all of us are doing the same thing at the same time. Go, what the hell is happening? This is so surreal. I can't, it goes so fast, and yet the world is such a tiny little place. Unless you have to walk it. You know, then I could see where you say, oh, it's a giant, vast, gigantic place. I couldn't possibly know about every nook and cranny of it. But, you know, considering we're a modern society, considering we could travel and everything, I just, you know, it's not that complex. I think it's all connected. And so that's why you kind of need free speech TV, I think, you know. And if you're watching and you watched last week, thank you very much last week. You did great. Do it again. Do it again this week. This is the last week of the Free Speech TV Spring Pledge Drive. And we are here to orient you, to connect the dots, to make what seems unconnected, connected, so you can make decent decisions about the future. Because America still is, for 5 more minutes, unless, you know, we lose, which would be just unbelievable, okay? That would be inexcusable. But, you know, we are the leading world voice. We literally are the leaders of the free world. And I think it's important that the leaders of the free world have an informed electorate. And that's what we do. And that's why we're doing it so completely in it right now, especially until the election. So if you feel like you need to support something, I would say it would be Free Speech TV. Just saying. So if you can, and if you would like, and if you will, if you must, if you may, please dial 877-378-8669 and contribute to the last week of the Free Speech TV Spring Pledge Drive. I know it's a mouthful. You can, you see the QR code there? You see it over there? You can use your phone. It'll take you right to freespeech.org, a not-for-profit, actually. That's why it's an org, not a com. And you can also use your phone in a new way. Yeah, real new. Text FSTV. Oh, yeah. See, I'm wearing it today. FSTV. See that? It's a cool-looking sweatshirt, isn't it?
I love that sweatshirt.
I think it's $250. It's like the most expensive thing I wear. But, yeah, that you can get that as a premium if you made a big fat donation to Free Speech TV. Just text FSTV to 44321 on your phone, and it'll give you a secure link, and you can make your donation that way. And we thank you, and you owe us. Just saying. There's an extraordinary amount of work that goes into all of this, but hey, we do it happily. So this is what I'm threatening to play for you. I'm going to play it for you. Now, while you're listening to what happened last week, I have had this clip since, last Tuesday, but I didn't want to disturb you with a 3-minute clip, 3 whole minutes. No, didn't want to. But I think it's very important now that you understand, because the United States knew some stuff, okay? We knew some things. And we knew we knew that Russia was about to go through some things. Yeah. And so Biden gave Russia warning. Biden told Russia that they were going to be targeted by an Islamic, extremist group called ISIS-K, the same group that attacked us when we were leaving Afghanistan. We're targeting Russia because they don't like the way you are behaving in the Islamic world, and you keep vetoing, anything to do with the ceasefire. They're just, they got their panties in a bunch. They are a terrorist group, and they don't give a damn about you. And so Jake Sullivan said the same thing. He told the same thing to Benjamin Netanyahu. We think it would be a terrible mistake for Israel to not have a ceasefire and allow a surge of aid to go into Gaza. The pictures are horrible. The social media is worse. Okay, there is an enormous amount of trolling going on. There is an enormous amount of propaganda. It's likely that Russia is contributing to a lot of this, and it's not going to serve you well. You're going to end up, being a pariah all alone in the world. And that is not something anybody who cares for Israel or who loves Israel wants to see happen to Israel. And so you and your right-wing extremist government, which represents a very small minority of people in Israel, have got to pay attention to what the blowback's going to look like. We even went as far as telling them, learn from our mistakes. Our mistakes. You know why? There was no ISIS before George W. There was no ISIS before Abu Ghraib, a prison in Iraq, where those pictures went public. You remember that? They were brutal. They were hideous. I talked about them incessantly to protect us from the blowback. And now you see the blowback. The blowback includes attacks on the United States' interest. It includes attacks on Israel. It includes attacks on Russia. It includes attacks on anybody who is part of the attack on the Islamic world. And so we even said to Israel, learn from our mistakes. Don't do what we did. So Jake Sullivan, after the phone call between Biden and Netanyahu last week, he went to give the readout to the world at large and to the United States, to us, the citizens, on what transpired on that call.
Earlier today, President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you all have heard. The two leaders discussed the latest developments in Israel and Gaza, and they spoke about the state of Israel's military operations. The president emphasized his bone-deep commitment to ensuring the long-term security of Israel, and he affirmed, as he did in the State of the Union, that Israel has a right to go after Hamas, the perpetrators of the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Israel has made significant progress against Hamas. They've broken a significant number of Hamas battalions, killed thousands of Hamas fighters, including senior commanders. Hamas's number 3, Marwan Issa, was killed in an Israeli operation last week. The rest of the top leaders are in hiding, likely deep in the Hamas tunnel network. And justice will come for them too, and we are helping to ensure that. At the same time, more innocent civilians have died in this conflict, in this military operation, than in all of the wars in Gaza combined, including thousands of children. A humanitarian crisis has descended across Gaza, and anarchy reigns in areas that Israel's military has cleared but not stabilized. When the president visited Israel on October 18th, the first U.S. president to make a wartime visit to Israel, I might add, he said both privately and publicly that the United States has learned a vital lesson over the course of several wars. A military plan cannot succeed without an integrated humanitarian plan and political plan. And the President has repeatedly made the point that continuing military operations need to be connected to a clear strategic endgame. The President told the Prime Minister again today that we share the goal of defeating Hamas, but we just believe you need a coherent and sustainable strategy to make that happen. Now, instead of pause to reevaluate where things stand in the campaign and what adjustments are needed to achieve long-term success, instead of a focus on stabilizing the areas of Gaza that Israel has cleared so that Hamas does not regenerate and retake territory that Israel has already cleared, the Israeli government is now talking about launching a major military operation in Rafah.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there, and then I'll play you the rest of it on the other side, because 3 minutes is too long for a segment. It's too long for people to pay attention, and it's too long for a segment.
Clear for takeoff. Something is happening in American politics. For decades, Republicans called themselves the party of strength in foreign policy. Today, the Republican Party attacks our military.
Some of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life.
And cozies up to our enemies.
Hezbollah is very smart. They're all very smart.
Republican senators are blocking key military appointments, making America less safe.
This sweeping hold is undermining America's military readiness.
Republicans are helping Vladimir Putin by calling for the end of military aid to the brave Ukrainians.
Under Republican, not another penny will go to Ukraine.
Today, President Joe Biden is the voice of a strong America.
Let there be no doubt, the United States has Israel's back.
This is an American president.
We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas, tyrants like Putin win.
President Joe Biden, America's president.
He's above the law. He's too powerful. Nothing can stop him. The courts and the media have given up. We're too divided to beat him.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
That's the same story from every country that's slipped into dictatorship. But that's not America. There is a powerful force that can stop Trump.
Democracy is who we are.
It's you. It's your vote and your voice.
This is one of those defining moments in American history. Each of those who vote will be remembered. So let's love good. Let's get back to work.
This year, it's America or Trump. And America's counting on you.
Why does MAGA love Vladimir Putin so much? He reminds them of someone they love. Both are pathological liars.
We will be aiming at denazification of Ukraine.
I think it was an insurrection caused by Nancy Pelosi.
Both hate democracy.
He controls the press. He controls the oligarchs.
Both use violence to attack law and order.
We will never give up. We will never concede. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
Both demean women.
Blood coming out of her wherever.
Both think their supporters are stupid.
Vladimir Putin has signed a decree banning so-called homosexual propaganda.
I love the poorly educated.
But the one big difference between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, in America, our votes count. We can stop Donald Trump. Don't let MAGA turn America into Russia. Vote because you still believe in America.
American security. It's a president's and a party's highest calling, protecting us in a dangerous world. Standing strong against all enemies. It's why Americans are outraged that Trump's MAGA party is deliberately leaving us open to attacks. They refuse to protect the border, shutting down the toughest bipartisan border security law in decades. Instead, they're helping the cartels, the coyotes, and the human traffickers just to score political points. Worse, they're backing Vladimir Putin's murderous regime. MAGA Republicans have cut off weapons in support to the free people of Ukraine.
If they're not going to pay, we're not going to protect.
They want Putin to win. Weak on the border, weak on national security. We know what side the MAGA GOP is on, and it's not America.
Whether you're listening to Leslie Marshall each Tuesday through Friday or Brad Bannon each Monday, you can hear them from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern on the Progressive Voices Network. Here's a sample of what you'll hear.
USW Vice President Louis Mendoza. And Vice President Mendoza, before the break, you were talking about how important it is that workers are an active part of the workplace health and safety plans. So speak to us about that. Like, they need to think, not just about, me, myself, and I, but like, you're a team, right?
Yes. And that's very important for us that we educate our membership to understand that we have a role to play when it comes to our health and safety.
Don't give up. Don't give up. What's true?
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
The President and the Prime Minister spoke at length about Rafah today. The President explained why he is so deeply concerned about the prospect of Israel conducting major military operations in Rafah of the kind it conducted in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. First, more than 1 million people have taken refuge in Rafah. They went from Gaza City to Khan Yunis and then to Rafah. And they have nowhere else to go. Gaza's other major cities have largely been destroyed. And Israel has not presented us or the world with a plan for how or where they would safely move those civilians, let alone feed and house them and ensure access to basic things like sanitation. Second, Rafah is a primary entry point for humanitarian assistance into Gaza from Egypt and from Israel. An invasion would shut that down, or at least put it at grave risk, right at the moment when it is most sorely needed. Third, Rafah is on the border with Egypt, which has voiced its deep alarm over a major military operation there, and has even raised questions about its future relationship with Israel as a result of any impending military operation. Now, the President has rejected, and did again today, the straw man that raising questions about Rafah is the same as raising questions about defeating Hamas. That's just nonsense. Our position is that Hamas should not be allowed a safe haven in Rafah or anywhere else. But a major ground operation there would be a mistake. It would lead to more innocent civilian deaths, worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis, deepen the anarchy in Gaza, and further isolate Israel internationally. More importantly, the key goals Israel wants to achieve in Rafah can be done by other means. On the call today, President Biden asked the Prime Minister to send a senior interagency team composed of military, intelligence, and humanitarian officials to Washington in the coming days to hear U.S. concerns about Israel's current Rafah planning and to lay out an alternative approach that would target key Hamas elements in Rafah and secure the Egypt-Gaza border without a major ground invasion. The Prime Minister agreed that he would send a team. Obviously, he has his own point of view on a Rafah operation, but he agreed that he would send a team to Washington to have this discussion and have this engagement. And we look forward to those discussions.
And today canceled. So there is a team that had been dispatched to the Pentagon, from my understanding, but the President Netanyahu and his uber nationalist right-wing cabinet members and the people that, we were inviting over here to hear some sort of a different way of going about routing out Hamas, which is a terrorist organization that has been running that place for 20 years now and using the innocent people of Gaza as human shields and continue to do it. And now he said, no, I'm not coming because the United Nations said I need to stop. Everyone said you need to stop. Everyone said you need a different plan. Everyone said the blowback from what you've done already is severe and very damaging. If you go into the place where you told people to go for their own safety after killing, indiscriminately in order to get some of the head guys of Hamas, you are going to end up so alone in the world and you will be attacked. We don't want that for you. Kamala went around this weekend telling everybody the same thing.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake. Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. And we're looking at about 1.5 million people in Rafah who are there because they were told to go there, most of them. And so we've been very clear that it would be a mistake to move into Rafah with any type of military operation.
A mistake, but would there be consequences if he does move forward?
Well, we're going to take it one step at a time, but we've been very clear in terms of our perspective on whether or not that should happen.
Are you ruling out that there would be consequences from the United States?
I am ruling out nothing.
Oof. Now, let me tell you, that's pretty direct for diplomatic speak, okay? Ruling out nothing. We're telling them again. We had the National Security Advisor do a press conference last week after the phone call between the two leaders. We invited you to come over here. We invited Israel to come over here and look at some alternative ways of doing what you set out to do, which is to rout out a terrorist organization from the Gaza Strip, okay? That is what you want to do. That is what we would like to see you do too. But you got to actually take into account the humanitarian crisis and plan for it and deal with it and make sure that the civilian casualties are kept to a bare minimum. We understand it's war, but you're making it look like Aleppo. You're making it look like freaking Chechnya. You're making it look like Grozny over here. And you can see what the blowback looks like all these many years later. They don't forget. They organize. They terrorize. They seek to get a political result through violence. And you know, in this weird way, the radical Islamists seem to have gotten what they wanted because they attacked Russia. They went to a concert. They attacked civilians. They killed 137 people. They arrested 4 guys. And you know what? Now, all of a sudden, Vlad realizes that the United States has been saying out loud, we made the warning to Vladimir Putin public ahead of the attack because we knew he was going to blame Ukraine, who has done nothing. On the one hand, you're saying Ukraine is full of Nazis. Now they're Islamicists? I mean, which is it with you? Nobody's buying what you're selling, okay, Vlad? No one. And so we try to explain this to Netanyahu, too, that, you know, there's always going to be blowback. And the way that you're doing this is endangering the country you say you love. And he's just like answering to his radical, ultra-nationalist, uber-Orthodox right wing, which is just like here. The uber-nationalist, evangelical Christian right wing is who Donald Trump, you know, it's so interesting because today, you know, there's a lot of Donald Trump news about, they lowered from 450 or 400, whatever. He only has to come up with a mere $175 million in order to get a bond to appeal, right? To appeal. That's what he needs, the $175 million. He has to tie it up. Now, it's going to earn interest every single day. So about, what did we say last week? Like $115,000, $119,000 worth of interest every single day. So no matter what this 175 is, he's going to end up paying $500 if he can do it at all, if he can, just for the right to appeal. So there's a lot of news about Donald Trump, but everyone was asking today, he's not expanding his base. Why does he keep playing to this little sliver of America? Why does he just not have an interest in expanding his base? Why does he keep playing to the uber right-wing, Christian nationalist, white supremacist crowd? Because they're the idiots that give him the money. I don't even think he wants to be president anymore, except that it would keep him out of jail, and that would be the plus. That would be the only thing going in his favor about wanting to be president again. He certainly doesn't want to be president again because it's going to keep him from, doing what he wants to do on the grift side of things. And he needs money badly. His kids need money badly. He's going to leave them penniless, broke. And so his new mob name is now Don Corleone. Which is a good one. But that's why they're not interested in expanding their base. Their base supports them in any murderous plot that they can come up with. And they will send the money that these, uber right-wing nationalists require in order to remain the top dog in the uber nationalist right-wing, movement. Now, Netanyahu's doing, and this is why I was very interested in what that caller was saying on Friday, where she said she had seen the Clarissa Ward piece. So I found it. It's easy enough to find. Anybody could have done it. But what's not explained sufficiently, and I can tell by the comments of the girl who saw it, is that this is the uber niche, ultra nationalist right wing in Israel. What she saw was a 78-year-old woman, her name's Daniela Weiss, who is considered to be the godmother of the settlers' efforts. They're in the West Bank, where they keep stealing land from Palestinians, keep stealing it. She doesn't give a damn. She is a very niche person that now she gave an interview to Clarissa Ward where she said, I'm sorry, but they're going to have to leave Gaza. They're going to have to go. She hardly calls them Palestinians. I get it. I know the history too. But she says they can't stay there. The Jews have to move in. They have to take this land. It'll be another Tel Aviv. It's beachfront property. They have to leave.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes. Randi Rhodes. Randi Rhodes. RandiRhodes.com.
911. What's your emergency?
America's healthcare system is broken and people are dying.
Welcome to Code WACK, where we shine a light on America's callous healthcare system, how it hurts us, and what we can do about it. I'm your host, Brenda Gazzar. This time on Code WACK, how are California nursing homes lacking in oversight and enforcement? And what can be done about it? And what reforms are in the works to better protect residents? To find out, we spoke to Tony Chicken.
I have great news to start with today. Violent crime continues to fall, and is at extraordinarily low rates for the history of the United States. And you might say, David, that's not what I'm hearing on Fox News. It's certainly not what I'm hearing from Republicans. I'm hearing crime.
Something is happening in American politics. For decades, Republicans called themselves the party of strength in foreign policy. Today, the Republican Party attacks our military.
Some of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life.
And cozies up to our enemies.
Hezbollah is very smart. They're all very smart.
Republican senators are blocking key military appointments, making America less safe.
This sweeping hold is undermining America's military readiness.
Republicans are helping Vladimir Putin by calling for the end of military aid to the brave Ukrainians.
Under Republican, not another penny will go to Ukraine.
Today, President Joe Biden is the voice of a strong America.
Let there be no doubt, the United States has Israel's back.
This is an American president.
We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas, tyrants like Putin win.
President Joe Biden, America's president.
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
This is all about reducing emissions and, by that measure, slowing climate change.
EPA issues new tailpipe emissions rules, the most significant climate regulation in U.S. history. Exxon CEO blames the victim, says climate change is your fault. Plus,
this annual report shows that the climate crisis is the defining challenge that humanity faces.
UN Weather Agency issues red alert in new State of the Climate report.
All of those alerts and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The history your company has in climate denial, misinformation, how do you address that history?
Where we are today is how can we contribute to a solution set, not debate the past.
Yeah, I guess you don't want to debate the past, Darren Woods, ExxonMobil's CEO. I wouldn't want to do that either if I were you. This is your Green News Report. Well, the liars keep on lying, Desi Doyen, especially over at ExxonMobil. What do you got for us today?
Well, first, record heat and humidity in Brazil. This week, the city of Rio de Janeiro recorded an astonishing heat index. That's the combined feels-like temperature of heat and humidity, hitting 144 degrees Fahrenheit.
What? 144 degrees?
Fahrenheit. Stifling heat has spread across South America, causing massive wildfires in Chile and Argentina. Meanwhile, the UN World Meteorological Organization issued a, quote, red alert in its State of the Climate report released this week. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced the stark findings.
Sirens are blaring across all major indicators. Last year saw record heat, record sea levels, and record ocean surface temperatures. Glaciers likely lost more ice than ever before. Some records are just chart-topping, they are chart-busting.
The report warns that the impacts of man-made climate change are accelerating, driven by humanity's burning of fossil fuels. It cites rising ocean acidification, marine heat waves, and the documented increase in the frequency and intensity of storms, wildfires, floods, and droughts, and heat waves in every country. The report finds some hope in the accelerating deployment of renewable energy globally, but it warns that so far, efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change are inadequate.
Not much hope in Brazil, where it feels like 144 degrees. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting that out of my head.
And the CEO of oil giant Exxon says that's all your fault for continuing to use fossil fuels. Exxon is among the top contributors to global planet-heating greenhouse gas emissions. But in a recent rare media interview, Exxon CEO Darren Woods said the oil industry will continue producing fossil fuels regardless of the impacts as long as there is demand. He brushed aside investigations proving that Exxon executives knew for decades that burning fossil fuels would cause the catastrophic impacts we are seeing today.
Well, we don't want to talk.
Mary had a little ram. The fall. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
There are real fears on the part of Arabs, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of them, who think once Gazans leave Gaza, Netanyahu's never going to let them back in.
Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. So, if you think about even the construct, like, Gaza was not really a historical precedent, right? It was the result of a war, right? You had tribes that were in different places, but then Gaza became a thing. Egypt, used to run it. And then, over time, you had different governments that came in different ways. So you have another war, usually when wars happen, borders are changed historically over time. And so my sense is I would say, how do we deal with the terror threat that is there so that it cannot be a threat to Israel or to Egypt, right? I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards.
Wow. So we played that last week because it was shocking. I'm telling you, to hear a person talk about a place that is on the verge of a famine, where children, women, innocent civilians who have nothing to do with the hostilities are dying. They're losing limbs. They're, starving to death. Their children are starving to death. Pregnant women they can't even give birth to healthy babies anymore. There is no hospital. There's no medical. Right. And he's talking about, wow, there's like nothing left. I think it's, very valuable beachfront property. Okay. And so now as the lead in, I'm going to play you what their ultra right wing, and I want you to know that it's just like our ultra right wing. Okay, it doesn't represent, like MAGA in this country is about 1/6 of the voting population of this country. Okay? If you look at the party breakdown in the United States, right, you'll see 1/3 are Democrats, 1/3 are independents, and 1/3 are Republicans. Of those 1/3 Republicans, 1/3 are MAGA. So half of the 1/3 is 1/6. Okay, and that's a tiny smidge of America. And this uber right-wing settler group is a smidge of Israel. Most people in Israel are not happy about what's going on there. They're not happy about Netanyahu being their leader. They weren't happy before this happened. They weren't happy when he failed to keep them safe. They weren't happy when he refused to deal with the hostages first. And they're not happy with him now. And that's something that America doesn't get to hear. It's just cut and dried, right and wrong, and whatever the propaganda tells you to hate, that's what everybody's going to hate, and people are going to glom on. And the uber hard left in this country has gone so hard left that they're all the way over to the right now with this little smidgen of nationalism that's taken place. So this was Clarissa Ward interviewing one of Israel's, let's call her a MAGA, okay? Because this is an ultra-nationalist that also, she obviously heard what Jared said. Okay, because I want to play you how she starts her conversation by telling Clarissa Ward that there's an enormous amount of support for what she wants to do in Gaza, in America.
There is a very strong support from very prominent, from very, I would say, wealthy people, wealthy Jews.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S.
Can you name any names?
No, I cannot.
I can.
Back at her home in Kedumim settlement, Weiss tells us she's already enrolled 500 families.
I even have on my cell phone names of people who say, enlist me, enroll me. I want to join. I want to join the groups that are going to settle Gaza.
I have to ask you, though, because we're sitting here talking and we're listening to the call
Yeah, I'm listening
to prayer.
it. I hope you are listening to
Which
it.
is a reminder, I think, of the people who live here, but also the people who live in Gaza. What happens to them in this vision of this new settlement with Jewish settlers even in Gaza City?
What I think about Gaza, the Arabs of Gaza lost the right to be in Gaza on the 7th of October. Yes, I do hear the mosque. I do hear the prayer. Things were different until the 7th of October. No Arab, I'm speaking about more than 2 million Arabs. They will not stay there. We, Jews, will be in Gaza.
That sounds like ethnic cleansing.
Okay. The Arabs want to annihilate the state of Israel. So you can call them monsters. You can call them cleansing of Jews. We are not doing to them. They are doing to us.
Okay, and this is the spiral. Okay, this is the hatred spiral. This is the spiral, and you know why? It becomes. You know what happens to it? Goes down the drain. Just circles the drain and circles the drain. The spiral does, and then down the drain. This is why Donald Trump is the center of attention. It's hard not to be the center when you're going down the tubes. It's hard not to be the center when you're going down the drain. That's what's happening to Donald Trump, and that's why everybody is focusing on Donald Trump today, okay? But really, truly, what should be focused on today is the ceasefire as a result of Russia not vetoing the ceasefire after they were attacked by radical Islamists, which today even Putin had to admit happened. All weekend long, he was trying to blame Ukraine. He can't do it because they took people into custody, okay? And the people that they took into custody, guess what they are? They're ISIS. And they confessed because they want to take credit for their heinous behavior. They want to take credit for killing civilians. They want to take credit for shooting up a concert hall where a 1970s hippie band, they were called Picnic, were about to play, and they came in and shut up the whole freaking place. And Russia is no stranger to terrorism because Russia is no stranger to a war in Islamic places and like leveling places like Chechnya down to the studs, down to the ground, down to ash. Okay? It's who Azerbaijan too. I mean, that's a war that nobody even paid any attention to way back in the day. Only reason why I know about it is because my friend Serge, a lot of you remember Serge, was so badly wounded in that war. He's Russian, and he was in a Russian tank turret and fighting in Azerbaijan, and he was fired on, and a missile went right down the turret, and 3/4 of his body was burned. He got skin grafts all over his body. Beautiful boy. That's the only reason why I know about that particular effort. Okay? But why does this woman think what she's saying? She tries to say it's not us who's cleansing. Well, she also gave an interview to the BBC. And when the BBC asked her, are you talking about ethnic cleansing? She said, I don't care what you call it. I don't care. So she knows what she's talking about. She's 78 years old. She's an uber nationalist, okay? And she organizes settlers to go and take land from people who have lived on that land, farmed that land, built on that land, because she thinks that God told her that. It's very interesting. But the blowback, it never, ever ceases to amaze me how people don't understand that, you can't go around shooting people and not expect blowback.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes. RandiRhodes.com.
The Bob Cesca Show.
Bob Cesca. Republicans are now putting up for president once again a man who is probably up to his beady, freaky-looking eyeballs in blackmail from foreign nations or some sort of financial influence that he will then use the presidency in order to satisfy. And this is a huge issue. Anyone else, this would disqualify them from getting anywhere close to the White House. This compromises Donald Trump so badly that it could affect policy, it could affect the way he governs. We saw him, what was it? He got $5.5 million during his 4 years from China alone. God knows how many more millions on top of that. I mean, Rachel Maddow has been talking about this a lot in terms of bilking the Secret Service for room and board at his various resorts. I mean, that's how he does this. You don't want a man entering the White House while he is up to his beady goddamn eyeballs in debt of any sort, especially debt that pertains directly to his status as a business person, that exposes the fact that he's an enormous and obvious fraud. This further reinforces the fact that Donald Trump has no business being anywhere close to the economy, and why anyone, especially after watching him crash the economy, watching him rack up 14% unemployment, 9 million jobs lost, during COVID under Donald Trump.
Our challenge here is the national amnesia. I intend to help the public with their amnesia about Donald Trump.
Same.
And I hope the people listening also ramp up your efforts in this area. It's time to get back to work in this regard.
Bob Cesca. It's the Bob Cesca Show. New episodes every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everywhere you get your podcasts and at Bob Cesca.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day Centralia Coal Mine Number 5 exploded, killing 111 miners in Centralia, Illinois. The explosion occurred just as the day shift was ending. Those not killed instantly were trapped and died from their burns or the afterdamp. Words scrawled on the wall of the mine read, "Look in our pockets. We all have notes. Please give them to our wives." State inspectors had been forewarning mine owners about the dangers of accumulated combustible coal dust for years before the explosion, but were ignored. Illinois Mine Inspector Driscoll Scanlon had been filing reports since 1942 about deteriorating conditions. The demand for coal during wartime had increased production at the expense of safety. In the aftermath of the explosion, John L. Lewis, president of the United Mine Workers of America, called a work stoppage in memory of the dead miners. He also held Secretary of the Interior Julius Krug guilty of criminal negligence. Lewis accused Krug of having failed to enforce existing mine regulations. In response, Krug ordered that 518 mines remain closed for inspection. The House and Senate proceeded to organize hearings on mine safety. They demanded that the Bureau of Mines continue to pass inspection findings on to the proper state agencies. Given the power mine owners had at the state level, these instructions ensured no improvements in mine safety would occur. It would be another 22 years before any real change occurred at the federal level.
It happened an hour ago, way down in this tunnel of coal. The gas caught fire from somebody's lamp, and the miners are choking in smoke.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Tell me, is it right now? Tell me, is it right?
I watched it on TV.
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Boy, you could never tell Daniela Weiss here, the 78-year-old woman who lives in the West Bank and is in charge of a whole bunch of settlers who go around just shooting people and moving them off the land, and then they build. That the same thing shouldn't happen to Gaza. She believes that if they don't do that, if they don't take over Gaza, she doesn't really care what happens to the people who live there. It's just 2 million people. There are 52 Muslim nations in the world. They could go there. There's no other place for Jews to go, right? And so but there's 52 Muslim nations, so they could go there. Somebody needs to explain to her that it doesn't matter anymore because the world is a small place unless you have to walk it, right? Very tiny little marble. And that is why ISIS-K was able to attack in such a gigantic at-war country like Russia and get away with it. Moving people, killing people, settling their land is going to create not security and peace. Blowback! But you can't convince people who are unconvincible, who are like thinking my way or the highway, that they are putting everyone else in harm's way. Everyone else.
We are not doing to them. They are doing to us. I couldn't make it clearer when I said that myself, as a person who is preoccupied with settling the land, until the 7th of October, I didn't have plans of returning to Gaza.
No, you were
It's
settling
clear.
the West
I'm
Bank.
not interested in cleansing.
What is clear is that Weiss's views, traditionally seen as extreme in Israel, have become more popular since October 7th. In late January, jubilant crowds packed an auditorium in Jerusalem for the Victory of Israel conference, calling for the resettlement of Gaza. A poll that month from the Jewish People Policy Institute found that 26% of Israelis advocate the reconstruction of the Gush Katif settlements after the war is over. Among supporters of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing coalition government, that number jumps to 51%. Several ministers were present at the conference, including far-right heritage minister Amichai Eliyahu. In a rare interview with Western media, he tells us his political decisions are guided by the Torah. Is there anything about Gush Katif in here?
Yes.
And that settlements in Gaza are needed to prevent another October 7th.
Listen, I got news for you. You kill even more people than you've killed. There will be blowback. And the idea that, if we just move them, and the numbers are so similar here and there for uber nationalistic viewpoints, for radical right-wing viewpoints. I mean, here it's white supremacist Christian nationalism, and there it's Jewish nationalism. And both of these things are a minority of the people in either country support it. And yet it gets all the play around the world, doesn't it? Doesn't it? The most disgusting, hateful people get all the time and attention. They get all the TV cameras. They get all the people, in the world going, what is wrong with them? And really what is wrong with them is that they are part of a teeny tiny minority, and they have in both countries a psychotic leader who's trying to escape prison in both instances, in both countries. And so they have a desire to maintain chaos. And whoever has to die, they have to die. And that's just the way it is. You live, you die. They say that. You live, you die. But it's a tiny, teeny, tiny minority. And I'm just so terrified that here in this country, where there's very, very little information about the 75 years or about the situation in Russia or the situation in Israel or the situation here with regard to strong men being, prominent or rising somehow to prominence so that they will never, ever have to answer for their crimes of fraud and bribery. Vlad, come on, he's grand theft larceny. He stole everything from that country, like every dollar there was in Russia. Every single business there was in Russia, he gets a piece of. Every single one. And if you don't give him a piece, you don't get to be anything in Russia. You get to be cannon fodder. Well, it's the same thing over there, and it's the same thing here. And why people can't see it like crystal clear and connect all these dots back to the uber right-wing nationalistic view of each of these three leaders who have no right to lead dogs in a dog sled contest, let alone human breathing people who just want to continue to live somewhat democratically. It's beyond me. It's beyond me. But, that's why my beef is also with the left wing, the hard left. The hard left is driving this polarization wedge in between, especially younger people who get their news off of social media, which is full of propaganda about what is and what isn't going on. And there are people that are just doubling down on that information instead of saying that, we have a country that sees that this carnage has got to stop. We have a country that understands blowback. We have a country that said, why don't you learn from us? Why don't you learn from our tough slog? Why don't you learn from our mistakes? ISIS exists because of the United States. It does. That's a fact. We spent 20 years in Afghanistan. The Russians spent 9 years before us in Afghanistan. The Iraq portion had nothing to do with 9/11, like nothing, which was an Al-Qaeda operation, okay? 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabians, and we go to Iraq? We go to freaking Iraq? And what do we do in Iraq? We set up all these, very bizarre prisons. Very, very ugly prisons. And then the photos of the torture that we're doing to these Islamic men while they're naked, sicking dogs on them, piling up naked in pyramids in front of women. Well, of course it's going to radicalize people. Of course it's going to make people who were not really violent very violent. It's just like January 6th. You egg them on, you give them a place to feel like they got a leader who supports this kind of violence. Violence is now necessary. Somebody is stealing something from you. They're stealing your dignity. They're stealing your religion. They're stealing your, your humanity. Donald Trump, they're stealing your vote. They're stealing your freedom. Meanwhile, we have less freedom because of Donald Trump than we did before Donald Trump, but it doesn't seem to matter. Among the small, tiny minority that he's still grifting. As long as there are people that will send him $5, he's going to, not try to expand the base. He's going to take every last nickel they have to try and keep his ass out of jail. That is the nature of con men.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes. Randi Rhodes. Randi Rhodes. RandiRhodes.com.
This is Stephanie Miller, and here's what you missed. It's as if we're in this massive simulation. What if he crossed this red line? What if he actually didn't just talk about grabbing a woman by the pussy? What if he actually raped a woman? Is that too far? What if he actually tried to overthrow the government? What if he actually incited violence? And the GOP just shrugs and says, yeah, 4 more years. We want 4 more years of that. Right? Not just COVID, everything down the memory hole. That, you're raising a kid, just him imitating the stutter takes you back to him imitating the, reporter with the disability.
Boy, all the Christians who weren't outraged at him mocking a disability are going to be really mad about him mocking a stutter. We always assume the conservatives are speaking for Jesus. Immigration, abortion, LGBT issues, birth control, they're against Jesus on every one of these counts, and the media's got to stop pushing these people as Christian authorities. If you are against abortion rights because you love Jesus so much, even though he never mentioned it, but you support the death penalty, even though he did oppose it, the rest of us are not obliged to take your claims of piety seriously. I got to say, the media is the real culprit here because the media wants their Trump-sized ratings back. And that's why we're going to keep on getting these media stories, not about what a criminal Donald Trump is and how 80 million of us have lost our damned minds. The media is going to give us stories about how Americans are so mad about this choice. No one wants this election. These 2 candidates again. I mean, can you believe this horrible choice we have, Steph? Donald Trump leads a violent terrorist attack against America and ends 200 years of peaceful transfer of power. And Joe Biden thinks women should control their own bodies. Both sides have lost their mind. I mean, Joe Biden's old with a stutter, and Trump is old and rapes people. I don't know who to choose here. It's impossible to pick.
Hear all this and more on the next Stephanie Miller Show.
We're not blind. It's time we talk about this. Trump is not well.
It never said Trump's a great speaker. Never said, I've never heard it.
I don't like mosquitoes.
Your climb, they call it climate. Blah, blah. I don't mind being Nelson Mandela. They want to debank you, and we're going to debank transactions. I know paper. I know cans. An anonymous, really an anonymous country, and you do applicable. I took a cognitive test. We're funding Hezbollah and Hamas. You have a better chance of being struck by lightning than hitting a whale. We can't do anything. It would be nice to have an intelligent person be president. We would be in World War II. What? What is...
When a fox attacks a hen house, is it uncivil for the hens to raise a ruckus? 2 Supreme Court justices say it is. Elevating collegiality above social justice, right-wing extremist Amy Coney Barrett and progressive jurist Sonia Sotomayor have jointly been hailing America's top court as a model of genteel political discourse, claiming that the 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats disagree agreeably. We do not interrupt one another, and we never raise our voices, Barrett primly lectured to a recent conference of civics teachers. Sotomayor chimed in that court decorum frowns on any internal comments that, quote, could be viewed by other justices as hurtful. How sweet that the Supremes are so judiciously cordial inside their marble sanctuary. But how bitter that the court's lockstep Republican ideologues are so crudely...
Don't give up. Don't give up. What's true?
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Well, thank you, democracy lovers, for tuning in to Free Speech TV each and every day for all the shows that you love and count on being there each and every day, like Stephanie Miller and Tom Hartman and Amy Goodman and maybe even me. And the only way that we can do this is because there are people that work very, very diligently and seamlessly and in the shadows. They don't want attention. They don't need for you to know their names. They just do their work. They do it seamlessly each and every day. And because of the work that they do, shows are created, shows are distributed, shows are visible on Dish Network on channel 9415. They're visible on DirecTV, channel 348. They're on Sling. They're on Roku. If you speak to your little remote and you say Free Speech TV, it'll come on. And that's because of their work. Mm-hmm. So we say thank you with these pledge drives. We support these pledge drives so that the people that do the heavy lifting can actually get paid. What a concept. So if you can, please do donate at 877-378-8669 right now. You can use the QR code on your screen. It'll take you to freespeech.org. You can go to freespeech.org with your little fingers if you like to type. And if you don't and you want to use your phone, just text FSTV. Free speech. Oh, see, everything's backwards on TV. FSTV to 44321. And we'll send you a secure link, and you could do a one-time. You could do a sustaining, meaning monthly. You could change it whenever you want. You can stop it. You can whatever. It's up to you. You do what you do you. Okay? And with a lot of gratitude and respect, I say thank you. Thank you for supporting us here at Free Speech TV. Judy in Idaho.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Judy.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I was listening to your talking about, Israel today, and it occurs to me that Netanyahu does not want to end the war in Gaza, because if he does, he's out of a job and will likely go to prison, which we are kind of experiencing the same thing here with Trump. If Trump doesn't get elected, he's fighting for his life. So
small world, huh, Judy?
I feel that there's same sort of winds are blowing in both our countries.
Yeah, and Russia too, because the Russian people are not happy with Vlad not keeping them safe either. So, the world.
It's horrible what happened over there.
Oh my God! But they're no strangers to that. That happened at the Beslan School. That happened at a concert hall. That happened at a theater. It happens there all the time, and that's because there's blowback. You can't just willy-nilly go killing people, especially, Arab people, Islamic people, and, call them whatever you want to call them and torture them and not expect that there's going to be blowback. And so it's just the same all over the world whenever you get a strongman leader who has done really illegal, bad things at the expense of their people, and they need to stay, firmly in charge, or else the people will eat them.
That's right. And they don't allow any discourse or changing of the rules.
That's right.
Because they're fighting for their survival.
And these rules work for them. They don't work for anybody else, but they work for them. Yeah.
Exactly.
You got it. You're seeing
and
it. That's it. That's what's going on.
It's going to happen to us if we're not careful.
It already happened to us, okay? I mean, it did.
It did.
Yeah.
But again,
right.
I
know.
I don't think we can survive that.
Well,
I really fear.
Here's the thing. What was uniquely American about 9/11? And so many people don't even remember it, okay? But what was uniquely American about it was it unified us. Every single person supported W, okay? Everybody.
Yeah.
There wasn't a person that didn't, wave a flag. There wasn't a person who said, hey, everybody will hear us soon, okay? There wasn't a person, to a man, America was united until he chose to go and invade Afghanistan and Iraq. And then people actually said, what are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing? This has nothing to do with what just happened. Like nothing.
And then we went, and then after that, we went after, another guy.
Right.
Captured him before we even got.
Listen.
Back to Afghanistan.
This is what bad human beings will do with a little bit of power, and this is what bad human beings will do. This is what good human beings do with an extraordinary amount of power. Because George Bush was probably as dumb as a rock. He was high as a kite. Okay, the guy was like stoned his whole presidency, and he just wanted to avenge Daddy. I mean, that's kind of what he did.
I love you.
Thanks. Be a good girl. Thank you for calling.
All right,
me.
thanks.
Bye, Judy.
Bye-bye.
Bye. She gets it. I mean, it's really very basic. Trying to figure out the world can seem very overwhelming, but it isn't. Good people with too much power do really bad things, and bad people with a little bit of power do really bad things. That's all you need to know to start putting it all together for yourself.
Literally listening to you, two themes: power corrupts and follow the money.
And absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
You got it.
And so that's why America, as messy and difficult as it is, has checks and balances in place, supposedly to hold the very, very powerful to account, although not while they hold power. We have to do something about this OLC memo. It's called the Dixon memo. One of my listeners actually wrote to me and said, can we please talk about the Dixon memo soon? And, we should. We really should, especially before we crown a new, anoint a new king, right? Because we need checks and balances. That's why you have checks and balances, to prevent good people with a lot of power from doing bad things, and to prevent really bad people with a lot of power from doing really, really, really heinous things. Because guess who pays for that? Judy, me, you, your kids, your grandkids. And I'm done. We're done paying for really bad things. Now, typically, the really bad stuff happens with Republican presidents. Don't ask me why, but they have this nasty little habit of doing things like selling tow missiles to the Iranians, laundering the money through the Saudi Arabians, taking that money and, financing illegal wars in Central America all those years ago, something we're paying for today. Yeah. That's the problem in Central America. That's why the border is the border. That's why it's a topic. People don't want to understand what the hell we do has a price. Could be a good price, could be a bad price, but we're going to pay for it. The blowback that we're getting from radical Islam around this world is because those photos of Abu Ghraib and Camp Bucca, Okay, people saw them. Somebody had to pay for that. We did it. Russia did it in Chechnya. Russia did it in Aleppo. Look up Aleppo. Okay, look up what Russia and Assad did in Aleppo. Look up Syria and see that it looks like Gaza. I mean, it looks like the apartment blocks in Ukraine. It's how they fight. It's what they do, and they are one. They're the same people over and over.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes. Randi Rhodes. Randi Rhodes. RandiRhodes.com.
I got rid of Roe v. Wade.
Well, should the woman be punished for having an abortion?
There has to be some form of punishment.
We will root out the radical left thugs that live like vermin.
You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Trump wrote on social media, if you go after me, I'm coming after you.
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. I am your retribution.
What is a failed coup? Is it a loss? A defeat? A victory for the good guys? What happens to those who perpetrated the coup? Are there consequences? Or do they remain in power? And if they do, when are we safe? What will stop them next time?
Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy, put himself in power. Not America, not you.
A failed coup with no consequences is just a training exercise for the next attack.
I am your voice. I am your warrior. I am your justice. I am your retribution.
And make no mistake, they're going to try again. Unless you stop them.
Why can't you get over 75%, Donald? Joe Biden does.
Both Biden and Trump won, but President Biden is winning by significantly more.
Why do you have so much trouble getting it up? Your numbers, I mean. They changed the entire primary process to make it easier for you to dominate, and you're still coming up short. A whole lot of Republicans already think Joe Biden is a better choice. After all, he's stronger than you on the border, better on defense and security. Your campaign is broke. Your super PAC is broke. I mean, even the RNC is broke. You owe so much money, Donald. Money you don't have and can't get.
What?
Why did you even run?
What
are you trying to prove? That you can lose worse than last time? It's time to face the facts, Donald. America just isn't into you.
Whether you're listening to Leslie Marshall each Tuesday through Friday or Brad Bannon each Monday, you can hear them from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern on the Progressive Voices Network. Here's a sample of what you'll hear.
USW Vice President Louis Mendoza. And Vice President Mendoza, before the break, you were talking about how important it is that workers are an active part of the workplace health and safety plans. So speak to us about that. Like, they need to think it, not just about, me, myself, and I, but like, you're a team, right?
Yes. And that's very important for us that we educate our membership to understand that we have a role to play when it comes to our health and safety. Listen, we take it very serious, and it's a very important topic that we have to have with conversations with management and in our local unions. It's key that when people come into the shops that we represent, whether you're union, non-union, management, or contractors, that you go into those places and leave in the same manner as you came in, out to your families, right? So we strive, and we've done a lot of good work. We've got in paper, we've got a 10-point plan system that talks about full-time health and safety reps, right? Because if if I'm on the shop floor and I have a concern, logically, I would rather go to one of my peers than go to a member of management, right? So they can help mitigate that safety concern for me. So yeah, we've done a lot of good work over the last 5-10 years, and our work's not completed, right? As far as I'm concerned, work will never be completed on safety. There's always goals to strive.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to keep, moving forward, keep improving. We're never at a perfect place. Also, how does it affect at least the perception from the employer's standpoint when they see workers engaging about their responsibilities surrounding their health, surrounding?
Fatality. This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
They were blaming Ukraine before they even had the suspects. This was the narrative that they wanted. And that comes for a couple reasons. One, Vladimir Putin had just talked about how strong he was, as you noted at the top of the segment. If he's not strong on terrorism, it would look bad for him. So what could he do, or who could he blame? Well, Ukraine is a natural target for that. Second, Ukraine is who he wants to connect everything to. But think of the literal insanity of this. 2 years ago, he was claiming that Ukraine was about Nazis, while the leader of the Wagner Group wore a Nazi uniform fighting for the Russians. Now he's talking about the Ukrainians working with Islamic terrorists. That seems pretty insane and far-fetched. And some of the other claims coming out of the Russian government are that it was through a Ukrainian source in Tajikistan. And every time you see one of those layers, that is Putin showing what he wants to have the outcome be in the information space, and also trying to throw everything against the wall, hoping that something will stick that will convince the Russian people, which is the audience he's most worried about most right now, that it had something to do with Ukraine.
What happened is Vladimir Putin failed to keep Russians in Moscow in a concert hall safe. That is what happened. Why? Because he was distracted with a war of aggression against a country that did nothing to Russia. Ukraine did absolutely nothing to Russia. And he took his eye off of the ball, and the ball was the security ball. The ball was to keep Russians safe while he was waging his war of vanity and aggression. And he failed miserably to keep Russians safe. And you know what? Russians know it, just like we knew it. Everybody understands, as Israelis know it too. It's just Israelis, I'll give them credit. They're very loud when it comes to blaming Netanyahu for not keeping them safe on October 7th. Like really, really loud. The U.S. and Russia, not so much. We rally around the flag. I like the kvetchiness of the Israelis. I like that they, it took some chutzpah for you to sit there and say, we should kill more people. That'll solve our problem. What is wrong with them? And by them, I mean these strong men. What is wrong with them? And they live in fear, all three of them. And that's why I'm saying, when you look at Putin, you look at Netanyahu, and you look at Donald Trump, you need to conclude that these people will, A, never keep you safe, never. And B, they will blame the wrong person for whatever happens. Okay? It'll just be, whoever's the person they wish did it. They will never, ever, ever do their jobs. Never. They will not. And they will crush all dissent. Anybody that stands up to them will be crushed. Anybody that stands up to them will be called a name or labeled or ostracized. Or in China, they put the Muslims in camps. Okay, that's another thing. Communist China, they have Muslims. They have Muslim Uyghurs. They have Muslim Chinese. And they round them up and they put them in camps, 1 million at a time. This is what Donald Trump wants to do with the, people he feels, are not loyal to him. And don't be fooled by the idea that, it's just going to be brown people. No, it won't just be brown people. We're all brown now. All of us. Bob in Illinois.
Hello, Randy.
Hello, Bob.
Long time listener. was listening to you just when we were driving through Florida 10 or 20 years ago.
Oh, my God.
In any event, two things, and I'll be real brief.
Okay.
You're not going to like what I'm going to say, but if the international community has a better strategy than what the Israelis want to do in Rafah, forget about it. There is no strategy. Secondly, the UN resolution today is a complete waste of time because if I'm Netanyahu, and I don't think you'll disagree with me, the first thing I say publicly is release the hostages now or there's no ceasefire. Because Hamas is not going to release the hostages. They're going to demand the ceasefire and ignore their part of the bargain.
But
and that's a sad reality of what's going on.
But don't they want their prisoners?
Who, the Hamas?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the minute they give up the 100 Israeli prisoners and the other bodies that they're holding,
yeah,
it's over for them.
No, but there's an exchange that's going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
No, so I'm asking you, don't they want?
No, of course. Listen, I have family in Israel. My daughter.
No, I'm not asking about your family.
I know, but
I'm asking you, don't you think that Hamas and Israel, they did agree to a prisoner exchange. It's like 7,000, Palestinian prisoners for 100 Israeli.
Yeah, it was 800. Yes, yesterday it was 800 for 40.
Right. So, I mean, don't you think they want those people?
Yeah, they do, but they're not even going to give up a single prisoner. It's part of. First of all, you know this, and I do too. They're not recognized. Hamas is not by the UN. The UN has no jurisdiction over Hamas, unlike what they can do to Israel, as punishment. And that's the whole problem. That's the whole problem here.
Why? What do you think the UN would do to Israel as punishment?
Oh, they can take them. They can take them to the Hague and all that kind of stuff, and
right.
And they can maybe they can try to impose sanctions on them and that sort of stuff. And I wouldn't doubt that they're going to try to do something like that.
And what is left in Gaza to sanction?
Yeah, well, no, I'm not talking sanctioning Gaza. I'm talking about sanctioning Israel.
Well, you just said that they have no jurisdiction over.
Well, they don't. Come on, Randy. Hamas isn't recognized by the UN, and vice versa.
I'm not arguing that point. I'm arguing the point of what is left to do to Gaza as punishment. You said they'll punish Israel, but what will they do to Gaza if Gaza was, let's say, a recognized government, which it's not. It's a terrorist state.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what would be left to do?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
Right, and that's why the best they can do is to get their prisoners back.
Well, yeah, that's true. Except that when it's all over, when the Israelis get their 100 prisoners plus bodies back, and Hamas gets whatever number of people. It's not going to be over then. Israel has to go into Rafah, and they have to finish Hamas off. I mean, they won't kill every one of them, but they're going to kill the leaders, and the next generation of leaders will come up. It's a terrible situation because Gaza really did have a pretty nice place. Before this all started, they had a beautiful beachfront property that Jared would like to have control over. Go take a look at some of the pictures of what was there, and they had beautiful shopping centers. And the guys running Gaza and Hamas were living in villas all over the area there. So it's unfortunate that everything has been turned into Afghanistan there, but. It just is what it is, and again, and I'll get off. But
yeah, you need to, because this is where people go when they talk about this, right? It's always the same. You live, you die. It is what it is.
It is what it is means more people are going to die. I don't have a solution, and I'm just going to go back to my Hulu.
Right. Exactly. That's why I just Danny in Iowa.
I like to see the Democrats run ads against right-wing media. Back when Bernie Sanders was running, everything was about socialism. Now they're backing Trump, who's talking about a dictatorship his first day. So socialism compared to communism, run some sort of ad, seeing if that's where they're at right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's not so much. It's not communism, meaning, and it's not socialism because nobody wants to own the means of production. Okay, that's not. But there are some things that are socialist inside the United States, like Social Security, like Medicare trust fund, right? Like but there's nothing communist in the United States.
Right, but you have to put it in some way that they'll understand the comparison between socialism and communism.
Well, I know where you're going, but they don't know the difference between socialism and communism. They'll call me whatever comes to mind. Like one day in their world, I am a socialist, and the next day in their world, I am a communist. So, you know what I mean? What you need to actually say is a dictator versus democracy.
He said that's what he wants to be.
Right.
Day one.
Right. So there I agree with you.
Put it in words that they'll understand, though.
True that. Yeah. Big, bright red line between an elected representative of the people in a republic and a dictator on day one. Maybe day one turns into day 99.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes. RandiRhodes.com.
911, what's your emergency?
America's healthcare system is broken, and people are dying.
Welcome to Code WAC, where we shine a light on America's callous healthcare system, how it hurts us, and what we can do about it. I'm your host, Brenda Gazar. This time on Code WAC, how are California nursing homes lacking in oversight and enforcement? And what can be done about it? And what reforms are in the works to better protect residents? To find out, we spoke to Tony Chicatel, Senior Staff Attorney at California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform, or CANNER, where he promotes the rights of residents in long-term care facilities.
California has never had more nursing home complaints filed than ever before. In the last year, we now have had 14,000 nursing home complaints filed with the state. That is an all-time high. We were remarking 5 or 6 years ago when the number went over 10,000, like, oh my gosh, we're at 10,000 complaints a year against nursing homes, and now we're at 14,000. So there's more complaints than ever. There's fewer inspectors to go out and do the investigations on those complaints. We're way behind on surveys. So what does that lead to? It leads to cutting corners. So enforcement is lacking, whereas you might have spent 10 hours investigating this complaint. Maybe now you only spend 3 hours, and you miss some things that could have been flagged and improved. So pretty grim from an enforcement perspective. And I think quality has suffered as a result. I mean, we continue to get complaints about care that just boggle my mind. I mean, just gross neglect of residents.
Get the full Code WAC story on ProgressiveVoices.com and on the PV app. Catch all our episodes by subscribing to Code WAC wherever you find your podcasts. This podcast is powered by Heal California, a nonprofit that uplifts the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. Until next time, stay healthy.
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
This is all about reducing emissions and, by that measure, slowing climate change.
EPA issues new tailpipe emissions rules, the most significant climate regulation in U.S. history. Exxon CEO blames the victim, says climate change is your fault. Plus,
this annual report shows that the climate crisis is the defining challenge that humanity faces.
UN Weather Agency issues red alert in new State of the Climate report.
All of those alerts and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The history your company has in climate denial, misinformation, how do you address that history?
Where we are today is how can we contribute to a solution set, not debate the past.
Yeah, I guess you don't want to debate the past. Darren Woods, Exxon